Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Thorogood hosted webinar, Unlocking Copilot for Power BI. My name is Alaistair Jones. I'm a data and AI consultant at Thorogood, joining you from our Philadelphia offices, joined today by my colleague, Fernando Takeshi, who's also a data and AI consultant and is joining you all from our Sao Paulo, Brazil offices. So if you've found an interest in this webinar, it's likely because you're using Power BI and potentially using Copilot for Power BI, interested to learn more, or just have an interest in the functionality that's been added to the Power BI product that exists from Microsoft. It has some very compelling strengths, and these are aspects of the service that we'll get into through the course of today's webinar, but particularly compelling at providing quick page and report summarizations, pretty adept at simple visual generation, helps users navigate through reports that have been developed and delivered to organizations, specifications. It's able to adopt organizational context. So it isn't just understanding a report based on what it's seeing on the screen, but you can provide it with further instructions. Again, something that we'll share more about through the course of this webinar. And of course, a very compelling aspect of Copilot for Power BI is that it's natively available in Power BI. So it's something that you can kind of avail yourself of more easily than having to rely on an additional service or build something bespoke or outside of Power BI solution that you've already invested in. So what are we going to be covering today? We'll start with an overview of kind of what is Copilot for Power BI fundamentally. We'll then detail at present what we believe to be some of the kind of greatest strengths and some of the limitations that need to be taken into account with the service. We'll talk about how you can optimize a solution for Copilot. So there are some steps that you can take so that those reports that you've built in Power BI are more suited to Copilot use by end users. And then we'll talk about conclusions, next steps, how to get started, and things to consider as you kind of embark on a journey of adoption of Copilot for Power BI. So I'll start with that kind of initial kind of consideration of what is Copilot for Power BI. And actually, I'll step back a bit from that to consider the broad spectrum of AI solutions that exist today. In fact, this slide is pulled from another recent Thorogood webinar, Can We Do This with Copilot?, which I'd recommend to this audience. It's available on our YouTube channel. And it really details a lot of the various kind of AI solutions that exist in the market today. And a colleague, Andrew Kennedy, kind of categorizes AI solutions in two ways. So there's the kind of out-of-the-box solutions and solutions that are more bespoke or customized. And then within that, there are various distinctions. So Andrew talks about general AI assistants, so the kind of interfaces that are available in browsers that people may be familiar with. So OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini. Then there are add-ins that now exist within existing pieces of software. So we'll be talking about, obviously, Copilot. Copilot is an umbrella term for a lot of Microsoft's kind of AI offerings that exist largely within the software that they've already developed. So there's Copilot within Microsoft 365. Of course, most relevant for today's webinar is Copilot for Power BI, what we'll be discussing. There's certain software that's been built for this AI era, the likes of Cursor, Adobe Firefly, Jasper AI. And then, so those are distinctions within kind of more out-of-the-box solutions. Again, not clear distinctions between these things, but we're trying to create a kind of a mental model for people to help think about the different AI solutions that exist today. Then there are things that you can do with, open source large language models and kind of web apps and other solutions that exist that can be really customized. So they're not as defined as the AI add-ins or the general AI assistants that are less customizable, but we've seen organizations building their own AI workbenches, so their own internal chat tools that really are premised on a lot of proprietary and kind of private internal data. There are point applications, so AI solutions that have been built in web apps that kind of meet the needs of teams that are interested in finance data analysis or consumer insight analysis, as kind of indicated on the slide. And then, of course, a lot of buzz in 2025 really about agentic AI solutions. And there's a lot that can be done in terms of background automation around specific areas of interest. So procurement process automation, taking dozens or hundreds of hours out of more manual processes by just developing solutions that kick off agentic processes and work in the background. So again, spectrum of AI solutions that exist on the market today and different approaches that you can take. Again, not clear distinctions, but hopefully a useful mental model to think about these things. And today we're going to be talking about something that's been developed as kind of an AI add-in, so to speak, within existing software, and that is Power BI, and that's Copilot for Power BI. So that's what we're kind of zooming in on today, and it has various compelling strengths, both for how it's positioned and what it's able to do. I'll also step back and provide a bit of an overview of Power BI. I presume at this point, most people watching this video or attending this webinar have some familiarity with Power BI. But ultimately, for those who don't know, it's a unified data and analytics platform, very much a leader in the data visualization and dashboarding space. It's compatible with hundreds of data sources, so most of the popular CRMs, data lakes across the various clouds. So it's a Microsoft property, but it is open to connecting to sources from Google Cloud, Amazon, Oracle, etc. Connects to on-prem and cloud data warehouses, databases, local files, etc. So good at ingesting data from various sources, good at being able to transform data and then ultimately create kind of normalized data models that are effectively positioned to help build dashboards or help end users do the analysis that they need to do in a much more kind of user-friendly way. And again, it is user-friendly. So it's an intuitive tool for ultimately users to be able to filter or kind of explore and do analysis on top of reports that have been built to understand more about their data. There's various components to the tool. Usually reports are kind of developed and authored in the desktop tool, published to a browser environment, a Power BI service where these things can be, these reports can be accessed, and also they can be distributed and formatted for kind of mobile consumption as well. Example dashboard at the bottom here. Again, hopefully most people are familiar with what these kinds of Power BI dashboards look like. And I've mentioned that it's a leader in the data visualization and dashboarding space, and just to kind of bring that into focus, here we see a very kind of trusted source of the standing of various technologies, especially in the data and AI space, the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And we can see that Microsoft there is in the top right quadrant, both kind of a visionary and a leader in terms of ability to execute and completeness of vision. Power BI has been on the market for about a decade now, and we've seen it kind of rise into that top right quadrant, and it is kind of probably the most broadly adopted of the business intelligence offerings on the market. And then what is Copilot for Power BI? Well, kind of mentioned already that it's kind of AI functionality that is now integrated into existing software. So it's an AI assistant integrated directly within Power BI. It's able to respond to end users' natural language prompts and questions. It is able to do such things as provide summary takeaways, navigate reports, or generate visualizations. And it can be modified by developers, and it's easily accessible to end users. So we'll get into this as we discuss more about optimizing reports for Copilot use, but there are steps that you can take on top of reports or solutions that you've built, and end users will be able to kind of quickly access the kind of pane that prompts Power BI questions. And I'll just share a bit about what that looks like. So the developer view, when you're authoring or developing reports in Power BI desktop, you should see at the ribbon at the top, towards the top right, both a Copilot button, but also a prep data for AI button. And that allows users to either provide information about data schemas, provide something called verified answers, or add AI instructions that give a level of context or pre-prompting that is useful in optimizing your reports for kind of Copilot use. Again, something that we'll touch on later in the presentation. And then from a report consumer view, when you're accessing a report and you're typically in a browser and Power BI service, there's a button towards the top right of a report, Copilot, if it's enabled in your workspace. You click on that button and it opens the Copilot interface, which has a number of prompts there that users can quickly understand what's available in Copilot by clicking through those prompts. But at the bottom, there's the kind of typical chat interface that people might be used to with other AI solutions. So here I've just typed in a question: what is our profitability this year, and how does it compare with that of last year? And obviously you enter that prompt and you'll start to see Copilot generating responses. Now we'll turn to a view of strengths and limitations. Copilot for Power BI is something that we've worked with enterprise customers. We've done some analysis of it. I would say very much point-in-time analysis. Microsoft is very good at evolving products and services over time. So really these findings are valid as of really December, January 2025, 2026. And I'd say a lot of this is subject to change as Microsoft kind of responds to user feedback and enhances the tool. So Copilot for Power BI, what are the primary strengths? Well, it's natively available in Power BI, and that is compelling in a world where, access to data, coordination with various teams, or data governance considerations are kind of important and may take time to work through. So having it as something that is available out of the box within the Power BI interface is a compelling strength. And we found that that is why some organizations have thought to use it versus building something outside of the solution and something that's kind of bespoke. So lower cost and kind of level of effort to access the functionality. Effective summarization. So it's pretty compelling at providing succinct, either full report or specific page summaries. Visual generation. So it's able to create basic visualizations that correspond with user interest. So not maybe something too advanced, bringing in too many dimensions and measures, but if you're interested to, like the old Q&A feature that people may be familiar with in Power BI, if you're interested to create visualizations quickly in Power BI, Copilot can help users do that. We found that it's quite strong at report navigation. So again, sometimes reports have been developed that are reasonably complex, spanning different pages with different information on different pages. Of course, you can kind of label your pages with titles and provide general user guidance as people get started. But having the interface help direct users to the right page and then even visual to find the information that they're interested in is a compelling strength of Copilot for Power BI. And then context customization. So we've mentioned this already, but you can prep your kind of report and data model for Copilot for Power BI. So you can provide information such as verified answers. Again, colleague Fernando will talk more about this, but that helps you kind of inform Copilot for Power BI what types of responses we're expecting to provide users with. And then access to underlying data, of course, but Copilot for Power BI is plugged into the data model you've kind of invested in developing. So it has access to that data. It's also able to, as I said, create visuals, but also help you generate DAX queries. And that can sometimes be, from a developer point of view, authoring DAX queries isn't always straightforward. So there's a strength to Copilot for Power BI and being able to do that. And that's something that Microsoft's been trumpeting and evolving. So what are some of the limitations that we've encountered that, like, if we're being honest about, the service need to be considered? And again, this is at present, so these things are subject to change. But one thing is that there is a defined kind of interface for Copilot for Power BI. I shared a screenshot of what it looks like. It kind of appears to the right-hand side of the reports. It cannot be modified. It's been developed by Microsoft. So if you're interested in something that has a certain look and feel and is custom, well, that's not really possible with Copilot for Power BI. You're working within that like interface that exists. Processing and consistency, worth flagging that we have found in enterprise reporting settings that sometimes we're looking at 30 plus seconds of processing time for some queries that we were asking of Copilot. And sometimes the responses could be inconsistent. So the same question could yield different responses. Relatively, I'd say consistent, especially when you start fine tuning the Copilot for Power BI model that you're using, and Fernando will point you in the direction of some of the things that we did to improve that, but worth flagging. And then a final kind of limiting factor in our view is limited session memory. So it lacks the ability to view session history or context from prior interactions. Again, something that when you're developing a bespoke or custom solution is something that you can build into that solution. So these are some of our consideration on the left-hand side of the strengths that we've mentioned and some of the limiting factors. And with that shared, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Fernando, who can take you through more of the details around how you can consider optimizing Copilot for your solution.
All right. Thank you, Alaistair. So we already know about some of the strengths and limitations. So let's talk about how to optimize Copilot for your solution and take the best advantage of those strengths. So I have built up 3 things here on screen. Firstly, user training and instructions. As good as it may be, the best way to take the most advantage of the model itself is to know how to interact with it. So if your users know the best wording, the best phrasing, the best ways to interact with your own model, and what's the actual data that you have underlying your front end, Copilot will inevitably perform better. Following that, you can also do some data model design. Copilot is very good at handling the data. It has access to the underlying data, as Alaistair pointed to, but you can also help Copilot have the best chance of success by simplifying it. Maybe you take out some of the measures that are too complex for it to handle. Maybe you leave only the tables that you want Copilot to have access to, so you have only access to maybe the sales data, maybe only to the finance data, and not to the shipments if you don't want people asking questions about shipments or any other complex things you may not want to handle. Also, you can prepare data for AI. As Alaistair mentioned, Copilot for Power BI has this native functionality that allows you to customize Copilot a little bit for your use case. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the following slide, but I wanted to highlight that all of these steps, they are in an increasing level of complexity. It is much simpler to train your users than to actually prepare your data for AI. So that is something to think about. But the more complex you get, you also get the most impact on optimization. So zooming in a little bit on this prepare data for AI topic, Copilot for Power BI offers 3 features for us to explore with. Firstly, on data model filtering. As I was saying, if you simplify your model, you can increase Copilot's chances to success. And you can also do it natively. You can have your model as is, and within Copilot for Power BI, prepare data for AI feature, you can selectively select only a few tables, only a few columns that Copilot will have access to. You can also set up verified answers. So for example, if you know some questions would be very frequently asked by your users, for example, what is my share for this specific product, or what is sales for that specific brand? You can link specific questions to specific visuals, so you are sure, or probably almost sure, given some of these limitations, that Copilot will answer them consistently. And then third here on screen, AI instructions, which are just pre-prompting that will teach Copilot specific details about your data. And that could be industry-specific terms, that could be specific use case terms, or anything you may want Copilot to know before it acts on anything. So you can ask for a specific order of actions. You can tell it to prioritize either visuals, prioritize the underlying data, or even teach it about some of the jargon in your own company. Maybe you call sales a different way, or maybe you have a few types of sales that you may want to differentiate. And you can do all that within the AI instructions. So some of the conclusions and next steps here, and how to, again, unlock Copilot for Power BI in your organization. So firstly, you have to define if Copilot for Power BI is what you need. There are plenty of available choices, and you have to define if Copilot for Power BI is an add-in that you need and that you will be able to tackle your organization's challenges. Once you define that, you probably want to balance strengths and limitations. So it's very good at summarization. It's relatively good at navigation and also simple visual generation. But can you forego the speed and interface flexibility that maybe some other solution would get you? And then, as I was just saying, you can optimize Copilot for your use case. You can tailor its behavior and base knowledge to your specific use case, your specific industry, and probably get some organization-specific jargon and verified answers set up. But what happens if none of these questions are answered? So when you're defining if Copilot for Power BI is what you need, what if it's not what you need? Well, you may choose a different offering. The market is full of options that will be able to suit your need. Maybe you don't need an AI add-in. Maybe you need a standalone solution. Maybe you need something else. And what if when you're balancing strengths and limitations, the limitations are deal breakers for your use case? Well, you have to very clearly define your non-negotiables. Having a list will probably limit the available choices that you have and probably help you choose among so many options. And when you're optimizing your Copilot for your use case, you may think that, and you may find that you may need more customization. And that's where you probably need to go for a custom solution. And it probably follows something more towards the line of the bespoke kind of categorization that Alaistair was talking about. All of these questions can be pretty hard to navigate. And it is not easy to go about them on your own. And this is how it can help. Thorogood is a global independent data AI consultancy. And being independent, it means that we are able to listen to your challenges and offer you the best solution possible, not relying on a specific technology. We can offer you either Copilot, or we can offer you something more related to Databricks, because those are all technologies and we are partners with all of these companies. We're not tied to specific enterprise, meaning that, again, any of these solutions might be what you really need, might be what fit best on your own use case, your own industry. So thank you for your attention today, and please do not hesitate to reach out to us either on LinkedIn or on email. Thank you.